Hey, what's up, Brew Crew? Clay here with another Sixer. I hope everybody's having a wonderful week so far. So, we recently got a copy of the new version of Ra from 25th Century Games. This is a fantastic game that was originally released back in 1999. This was well before we got into board gaming as a hobby, and this got me thinking as more and more folks start playing board games every year, there are probably a lot of fantastic older games that folks may have missed, or maybe they just didn't know about because we have a tendency to focus on the new hotness. So, in this Sixer, I wanted to go back and talk about some older titles that I think are still worth trying out. I did try to set some guidelines for myself because there are a lot of fantastic games that have come out in the past. So, in order to find a way to narrow it down, first off, I kept it to only games that came out in 2013 or earlier. So, all of these games will be at least 10 years old now. I also won't be talking about some of the staples of the hobby like Seven Wonders, Pandemic, or Carcassonne. I feel like these are all pretty well known still, so talking about them won't be especially helpful. I did try to keep the difficulty and complexity level relatively low for these games, so that folks who are newer to the hobby can still enjoy them as well. Finally, I tried to only include games that are reasonably attainable. Giving out suggestions for a game that is super out of print wouldn't be very useful. All right, so with all of those conditions out of the way, here are my 6 games that you may have missed that are worth a try. The first game on my list is a small, excellent social game, and that's Skull, also known as Skull and Roses. This is one of my favorite bidding and bluffing games, and is often one we'll break out when we're sitting around a table having a few drinks. In this game, everyone gets 4 coasters. These will have 3 of them will have flowers on them, and 1 of them will have a skull. Players are going to take turns laying down one of their coasters face down in front of them, or bidding on how many coasters they could flip over without turning over a skull. If you fail, you lose one of your coasters at random. You can win by either successfully completing 2 bids, or by being the last player left with any coasters. The bluffing in this game is great, especially if you're able to convince your opponent that your coasters are safe, and then they flip over your skull. There are a few more rules, but that's really about all there is to it, and so it's a very easy game to get to the table. So, that's my number 6, Skull. My number 5 game on this list is Last Will. This is the Brewster's Millions of board games. Players are trying to inherit their deceased uncle's fortune, but in order to do that, they have to spend all of their money. It takes that concept we're all familiar with in games of trying to get the most money and flips it on its head. You're still trying to find ways to be efficient, but now you're trying to be efficiently wasteful with your money. You're going to buy properties at jacked up prices, trash them, and then sell them again at well below market value. You're going to be hiring shady characters to manage your money, and taking your significant other out for dinner along with your dog and your horse. It's a really solid game, but that added silliness just makes it so much fun to play. So if you get a chance, definitely check out Last Will. Number 4 on this list of older games is Alhambra. This game received a fair bit of love, at least in the past. It won the Spiel back in 2003, along with several other awards. But this game is easy to teach. It's an easy to teach tile laying game where players are going to use different types of currency to buy tiles to try to get majorities of certain types of buildings. There'll also be getting points for each section of a wall surrounding their city. That's really almost all there is to it. It plays so smooth, and it's one of those games where you can kind of find small victories, which definitely helps with teaching new gamers how to play. It also does something that I really like with the scoring phases, and that's that you don't know exactly when you're going to get those scoring phases. The first two of them are triggered when certain cards, randomly placed, are drawn out of the money deck. This provides some great tension because you don't know exactly when or if you'll be able to get that last tile you need to take the lead, or if you'll be able to connect that wall section that you've been working on. Super fun, super easy to teach, and really is a classic at this point. That's Alhambra. My number 3 was one of the earliest games in our collection, and that's Kingsburg. We have the older version, which was originally released in 2007, but there is a second edition version of it out there, released in 2017, that has expansion content included that I would highly recommend. Kingsburg was also the first dice worker placement game that I ever played, and that's a mechanism that is still one of my favorites. Players are going to be rolling dice and then placing dice in different combinations to take the benefit of certain spots on the board. Once a spot has been taken, another player can't put their dice there. This keeps the game really tight, especially if you really need a specific space and you can see that someone else has the ability to place dice there as well. Players are going to be getting points by building buildings and winning battles. The expansion also adds several modules like events, new kingdom boards, and some character abilities. This is a great game that I think still deserves some love, and that's Kingsburg. My number 2 is a classic that probably a lot of folks have heard of, but if you are newer to board gaming, you may not have necessarily played yet, and that's Power Grid. In this game, you are trying to power up the most cities on a map. You'll be using different resources like coal, oil, garbage, or uranium to power your plants. And these plants are going to be auctioned off each round, and you'll need to keep getting bigger and better plants because the game is over once someone powers a certain number of cities, depending on the number of players. This game was a little bit intimidating the first time we played it, mainly because we struggled a little bit with the rulebook, but once we got it figured out, the game played so smoothly, and we really ended up loving it. If you can, maybe find someone to teach you the game who has played it before if you find yourself in that situation. But I definitely believe that it's worth it. This is a game, too, where if you find that you really enjoy it, there are a ton of different map expansions out there as well. So, that's my number 2, Power Grid. All right, and finally my number 1 older game that I feel is worth a try is Concordia. This is the game that I'm always pointing out when the topic of elegant games comes up. The rulebook is basically 2 pieces of paper, but you get a lot of gameplay out of that short rulebook. This was, I believe, the first game that I ever played that had the action retrieval mechanism. What that means is that you have a hand of action cards and you play these down in front of you to take certain actions, but you can't use that action card again until you take a turn to pick up all of your played cards. These cards really are the heart and soul of the game too, because they're going to allow you to move around the map, set up trading posts, and generate goods, but they're also how you'll be scoring points, because each card is associated with a certain scoring objective, and it becomes a multiplier. So taking actions on the map is great, but you also want to be balancing that with purchasing these cards that will give you better opportunities to score at the end of the game. This is the heaviest game that I've included on this list, but if you're watching this, I think you're ready for it. The weight of this game comes from depth rather than from complexity. So, that's my number 1 older game that I think new folks should check out, Concordia. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around for this video. Let me know which older games that you still love. Are there any that you would recommend that new gamers go back and try? Let us know in the comments, and until next time, let's get another round for the table.